Welcome to ICSE, CBSE and WBBSE English Solution. Students, today we'll discuss the biography of Georgia Douglas Johnson. So let's start our topic of the day. Early life of Georgia Douglas Johnson. Georgia Blanche Douglas Camp Johnson, better known as Georgia Douglas Johnson, was an African American poet. She was one of the earliest African American female playwrights who was born as Georgia Blanche Douglas Camp in 1880 in Atlanta, Georgia, to Laura Douglas and George Camp. Camp lived for much of her childhood in Rome, Georgia. She received her education in both Rome and Atlanta, where she excelled in reading, recitations, and physical education. She also taught herself to play the violin. She developed a lifelong love of music that she expressed in her plays, which make distinct use of sacred music. She graduated from Atlanta University's Normal School in 1896. She taught school in Marietta, Georgia. In 1902, she left her teaching career to pursue her interest in music, attending Oberlin Conservatory of Music in Ohio. She wrote music from 1898 until 1959. After studying in Oberlin, Johnson returned to Atlanta, where she became assistant principal in a public school. Marriage and family. On September 28, 1903, Douglas married Henry Lincoln Johnson, an Atlanta lawyer and prominent Republican Party member. Douglas and Johnson had two sons, Henry Lincoln Johnson and Peter Douglas Johnson. In 1910, she moved to Washington, D.C. with her husband, where she remained for the rest of her life. After the death of her husband in 1925, Johnson was forced to support herself and her two sons through a series of temporary jobs. She worked as a substitute teacher and a file clerk for the civil service, ultimately securing a position with the Department of Labor, where she worked for a number of years. Johnson called her home at 1461 South Street Northwest in Washington, the halfway house, in the spirit of her willingness to provide shelter for those in need. On Saturday nights, she hosted open house attended by such Harlem Renaissance writers as Louis Alexander, Gwendolyn Bennett, Marita Bonner, County Cullen, Clarissa Scott Delaney, Jessie Renman Fawcett, Angelina Weld Grimke, Langston Hughes, Alan Locke, Kelly Miller, May Miller, Bruce Nordent, Willis Richardson, Annie Spencer, Jane Tomer, and E.C. Williams. The gathering became known as the A Street Saloon, and prominent writers often debuted new works at the gatherings. The writer Zora Neale Hurston was a regular at the salon as well. Now we'll read about her famous literary works. Johnson's first collection of poems, The Heart of a Woman, and other poems established her as one of the notable African American women poets of her time. Some of her other famous poems include Bronze, An Autumn Love Cycle, Share My World, and The Ordeal. In addition to poetry, Johnson wrote several plays such as A Sunday Morning in the South, Blue Blood, Plumes, Blue-Eyed Black Boy, A Bill to the Past, and so on. Johnson also wrote songs, short stories, taught music, and performed as an organist at her Congregational church. Death. This renowned poet breathed her last on May 15, 1966 at the age of 85 years in Washington, D.C. So that's all about Georgia Douglas Johnson. Thank you, students. Have a great day. And one request, students, if you have benefited from this video, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like our videos and share it with your friends. Bye bye, students.